Good morning, everyone. Nice to be with you virtually this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Daren Heyland. I'm a critical care physician and the founder of PlanWell Guide, and I'm very pleased today to be joined by my colleague, Jill Chambers, founder and president of Financial Concierge, for an important and timely conversation about navigating serious illness when you're aging solo. I'm also joined by my colleague, Brandy Bailey, one of our resident serious illness navigators, and she'll help us keep moving smoothly through our conversation today, monitor the chat throughout the session, and later she'll be making a special announcement about a new PlanWell Guide service that we're offering. There'll also be some time for questions and answers at the end that she'll moderate. So Brandy, do you want to just do some housekeeping things before we get started in our conversation?
Sure, you bet, Daren. Thanks. And hi, everybody. Good morning. Before we officially begin, we'd like to take a moment to do a land acknowledgement. I'm joining you today from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation, who have lived in relationship with these lands and waters since time immemorial. These lands were also historically shared with the Katzie and other Coast Salish peoples. Since we're gathering from many different places across Canada and perhaps even beyond, I invite you, if you like, to share in the chat the nation or nations that you're joining from. Also, just a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. Our session today is going to run approximately 1 hour in length. We are recording the presentation portion of today's session because we've had a few requests to share a recording later on. So we will be recording this just for the speakers portion. However, I will turn the recording off when we move to the Q&A section so that everybody can ask questions comfortably and privately. To help protect the privacy of everybody attending, we also ask that participants please not use AI recording, transcription, or note-taking apps during today's session. We'll have time for a live Q&A at the end, but please feel free to drop questions in the chat at any point as we go. To help keep audio clear, please stay muted until we get to the Q&A portion. And if it's helpful to you, live captions are available through the Zoom toolbar. If you look down at the menu there, you'll see an option that likely says show captions, and that'll get the captions going for you. And with that housekeeping taken care of, we can begin. Go ahead, Daren.
Great, thank you, Brandy, and welcome again, Jill. We're delighted to have you today as a guest on our series. Perhaps we could start with giving you some time to give a little bit of an introduction about yourself and your work through Financial Concierge. I think it would be really helpful for everyone to understand the unique role that you and your colleagues play in supporting individuals and families in incapacity. Would you please?
Thanks, Daren. It's great to be here. I always enjoy doing these conversations. And I usually tell people I have a very checkered past, just so you're aware. My initial career was nursing. I worked as a nurse in Manitoba for 30 years in many different areas, typically with both ends of the lifespan, new moms and babies and seniors. And in 2007, I did a 180-degree shift and I got into financial services. And I did that until 2018. And that's when I launched Financial Concierge. The focus then was really on dealing with older adults and what kind of supports do they need later in life. I always say sort of what did they need in the house? They had a broker, they had a banker, they had an investment advisor. So that's sort of how it started. So initially we did a lot of daily money management and document organization, and then we got into the power of attorney work, and then we got into sort of the estate administration. And so that's how you and I connected initially, was the idea if we're getting appointed, and I'm from Alberta, so I'll use the Alberta terminology. So the document we use here is the personal directive. And we will accept appointment as the agent in that document. Well, how do we, that's, as we've always talked about, that document is like the very end of the day, and how often are you ever actually asked to pull the plug? There's so many other things that go on in between there. So that's how we started our conversations. So you're right, I work with a lot of solo agers. And so to me, those are people who have, like my first client, they've outlived 5 executors. What do? They have nobody. So solo agers, they've either never married, unmarried, or have lost their partner. No kids, never had children all over the world. Or unfortunately, the kids are downright scoundrels. and we've met more than our share of that. And they may even have outlived family and friends, so they are very much on their own. And it may sound kind of conceited, but we become their person. We may be their sole contact and connection. So I guess what I should summarize though, so we can accept appointment. We're not a trust company, but we accept appointment as individuals into those important roles of executor for the will, attorney under the enduring power of attorney, which is the financial affairs, or agent under the personal directive. And to me, that's actually the biggest role, because that one could last for decades.
Thanks, Jill. Let me just back up and put this conversation in context with some statistics and what's happening in society today, as we consider that there's more than 1 million Canadian seniors living alone. And the older you get, the more likely you are to be experiencing those final stages of life by yourself. For example, 65-year and older people, are 1 in 4 are living alone independently. 85 years and older, half of these are living in private households by themselves. And again, if you consider sort of the fracture or dispersion of families, you just don't have anybody. And from my point of view, both observing as a clinician and the research that we've done, if you're seriously ill and older, you're much more likely to get bad health care and experience bad health outcomes if you don't have someone advocating for you, be that a family member or a close friend. So that role of advocacy is super important in healthcare. Jill, I don't know if you've got some anecdotes or some experiences to share to illustrate the importance of not just having someone named on a document, but having that person to play that advocacy role and ensure that, in my case, you get the right medical and personal care that's right for you, but in your case, the right stewardship of your financial resources. Any anecdotes or comments to really underscore the importance of that?
Unfortunately, too many. And here I come from a healthcare background, and I find it challenging to navigate the system. And nobody, regardless of your age, should be in the hospital without an advocate. And particularly when you're older, you can just, like, ageism is rampant, and these people are just kind of, they're all viewed. You're senior, you're 65 and older, you're just viewed as incompetent, and you're there, and you really do need an advocate. I guess I'm thinking of some of my examples. A challenge I find is that if I'm in one of those roles, maybe I'm the attorney managing the finances and somebody else is the agent under the personal directive, those people have to be on the same wavelength. And that's a challenge I find sometimes when family, they're just keen on getting that person into hospital and into a care facility. And I'm going, whoa, 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 that's not their wishes. So having an advocate and having somebody that really understands and shares your values is crucial. So having that conversation with them about what's really important to you. I had one person I'm dealing with, so she will be the agent under the personal directive. And her view when this older adult went into the hospital was, oh, well, that's it. Sell the house, sell the car. We're moving into assisted living. And I'm going, whoa, that's not what you wanted. Here's the document. And 3 places in this document, it states very clearly that she wants to age in place. She wants her resources to support her to live at home. She was even specific enough to say, regardless of the opinions of my family and my friends and my healthcare practitioner, my decision is to live at home. So that was somebody who was very, very, very clear. Some of my challenges, I think, are also with people get into hospital and sometimes they're declared way too quickly as having lost capacity. And once that decision's made, once somebody is told that they lack capacity, that's very difficult, if not impossible, to regain that sense of agency. And it's just as dangerous on the other end when it's too late, when people are declared to lack capacity, and so many issues have happened. So again, there I'm probably thinking a lot about the financial side. I often say to people, I'll go in there as your advocate, and I am there to advocate on behalf of the client. So whether the family thinks somebody should be going to a care facility or should or shouldn't have this treatment, I always go back and say, you're not my client. The the person that created that document, that personal directive or that power of attorney document, that's who I report to and work with.
Jill, some of your anecdotes illustrate, I think, a common misperception that preparing for incapacity is as simple as going to a lawyer's office and just filling out some forms, and where really the focus is on naming someone if you have someone to name. But you've illustrated a few times where you've really got to know the client and know what their wishes and values are so that you can play that advocacy role. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that in more detail, like your process of becoming that person for the client? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think this is essential to advocacy, is really knowing the wishes and values and preferences of the individual that you're representing.
Well, we view it very much as a relationship that we develop with the client. Very different than perhaps the lawyer where it's transactional. They're creating a document, that's it. They may never be involved again. When we are appointed by clients, I mean, it's a very serious decision on their part. I mean, we're very pleased that they trust us to work with them, and we will meet with them on a regular basis, depending on their age. If they're young adults, we might just meet every 5 years, and we kind of go through all the documentation, all the records that they have. When they get to be 60 or 65, we probably meet every 3 years. By the time they're 75, we're meeting annually. And we also say to the people, we're only going to meet once a year, but any question that comes up, you call us. Like, we're there, we're your person. And we meet annually, particularly if they're a solo ager, because who else is really checking on them and seeing what changes are occurring.
Yeah. So really, you're developing a relationship with that person longitudinally and keeping abreast of their evolving preferences and
Yeah.
values as they age. I, I think maybe we could focus in a little bit more on the solo agers, excuse me,
Mhm.
because there's another misconception that, well, I don't have anybody, and so it doesn't matter. I don't need to plan for a crisis or plan for incapacity because I don't have anybody, so it can't move forward. Um,
Yeah.
Perhaps I can just talk a little bit about, from a healthcare point of view,
Mhm.
what happens when people fail to plan because of I don't have anybody is what's in their headspace. And so we in healthcare will, when people are incapable of advocating for themselves, will look for a next of kin. And it may be that that person had a distant relative that is in their next of kin, but they didn't consider them to be close enough or able enough to play a role. And so we try and co-opt them into a decision-making role, which has life and death consequences with no preparation, meaning they didn't really know the person, the patient in the bed, and can't really advocate for themselves. But that is our obligation, is to go through a hierarchy of proximity to the patient to try and find a next of kin to represent that individual. If there is nobody, then we're going to a government office, the public guardian and trustee, to work with a government official to represent that patient. You can imagine that process takes time. Some of the decisions we're trying to make in healthcare are time sensitive. You can imagine that that person neither knows anything about the values and preferences of that individual. And so it isn't a satisfying experience from the healthcare point of view to have a solar ager declare, well, I don't have anybody, so I can't do this planning.
Mhm.
At Plan Well Guide, we do have a very extensive and exhaustive a planning process that a solo ager can go through to document at least their values and preferences. If they don't have anybody to advocate for them, they can, work with your organization, even from a healthcare point of view. But and perhaps you can comment on that, Jill, but I just want to try and dispel the myth that if I don't have anybody, I can't do this planning, therefore I'm stopping. Because there are dire
Mhm.
consequences from a healthcare point of view of getting the wrong care and ending up in a worse health state if you don't have somebody to advocate for yourself. Thoughts
Mhm.
on that?
Yeah. And I think that they do need to sort of search in their community for somebody if they can't find a professional to do it. So go to their faith community, their retirement community. There should be somebody there that is a friend or a contact. And when we talk about the documents that people create, the will, the power of attorney, and the personal directive, the will is really important because you want to know how your legacy is going to be looked after when you're gone. But the other two documents are absolutely essential. And people think, well, I don't have very much money, so I don't need to worry about it. Or, I don't really care about what happens to me health wise. But boy, when push comes to shove, they may really realize that, yeah, they do care whether there's a decision made that they're going to have chemotherapy or not have chemotherapy or have surgeries. I think one thing we talk about the person who is helping you make those decisions or making decisions on your behalf, you need to have the same values as them. Because what if I believe, I as the client, I believe really strongly in organ donation, and the person that I've appointed doesn't agree with that at all? So you better sort that out. I mean, I've had people come to me who say that they can't name family because family have a very different set of values and beliefs than they do. Um, in the family's view, for example, cremation is an absolute, non-negotiable. You absolutely cannot be cremated. And yet the client, the individual, that's what they want. So, there's lots of different things that you need to talk about. And if you haven't shared your values, then how are you going to sort of know what that other person's values are? And are they going to respect yours? Yeah. So I think everybody has to look for somebody. We always have to find a friend or a contact. And maybe I know some people put off doing their documents until they can find that person, but it is essential. And I don't know about you, but I certainly don't want the government making any more decisions about my life than they have to. Um, and certainly, if people do end up in that situation where they're under the public guardian or trustee, so guardian means same thing as agent under the personal protective, looking after health and everything else, and trustee means managing your finances. And that is it's a really challenging system to work with, even if they will accept you, because they're swamped. They don't have capacity to take on these files. I had an individual who was in hospital and had appointed a stepdaughter and stepson to be his agents and also his attorneys. And when they were contacted by the hospital, they both said, not me. No, I'm not interested. So now this individual who thought he was all set, he's back to having no one. And to even approach the Office of the Public Guardian, it could take 6 months before somebody could be appointed. Well, do you want to languish in a hospital for 6 months? I mean, they're just lovely places to be. Do you want to stay there for 6 months until somebody can make a decision and manage your finances or make decisions about where you should reside? So, anyway, so absolutely important to have somebody.
Yeah. Um, and somebody that's equipped and has capacity to advocate again. And just to go back to the healthcare scenario, research documents that the most common medical error is overtreatment, meaning an older person who, when you interview them and come to understand their authentic values and informed treatment preferences, would say, yeah, if my heart stops, I'm good to go on to the next phase of life. Um, but if that person can't advocate for themselves, it's super hard for an unprepared or an ill prepared named individual to put the brakes on the train. And
Yeah.
so healthcare tends to overtreat. That means we resuscitate people who otherwise, or we put people in an intensive care unit on a breathing machine who otherwise wouldn't have wanted that.
Mhm.
And the problem with that is that we can create health states that are worse than death and have people experience prolonged illness, prolonged disability, poor health outcomes for a longer period of time. So we come back to the importance of capacitating an advocate. And yet, if I'm a solo ager and I've got my neighbor next door and, we're friendly, we know each other, but I've heard a lot of solo agers say, well, I don't want to put that burden on my social contact,
Mhm.
or my friend down the street, or the lady I play cards with. And I guess I would just like to advocate for our services in the sense that we go through this preparatory process so that you, when you're competent, are able to identify your values and preferences
Yeah.
and almost give like a playbook to the person named to advocate for you in the context of health and personal care. So the
Mhm.
stress or the burden is less on that individual. In fact, all that individual has to do is bring the playbook and give it to the
That's right.
professionals.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important breakthrough in thinking for solo agers, is that you don't really need to put a lot of burden on the individual named
Mhm.
if it's a non-professional person named, because you can go through our planning process and just give them the playbook to relay your values and preferences to the care setting that's appropriate. And
We
I
feel
guess
the same way. Oh, sorry.
please go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'm thinking that when we're dealing with these clients and they're solo agers and we're going through that planning process, if somebody comes out of the blue later and says, well, why did you do that? Or why did you do this? I can say, well, because this is what Claire and I decided. This is what she decided. This is how she wants things done. And so then you have support, you have documentation to say this is why you made those decisions.
Yeah.
So one, the decisions being made that the client needs, and two, the person that is now making those decisions knows that they're doing it in the best interest of the client, and they can show that they've had these discussions. Everybody talks about having the paper trail.
Yeah, documentation is important here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, Jill, one of the things I hear a lot from solo agers is, as it relates to their financial care, is the fear of misuse of funds or abuse of funds. And of course, family and friends, or those people named as trustees of their resources, are frequently the perpetrator of these
Mhm.
problems. How do your company, how do you address that?
Yeah.
What's your advice to solo agers in terms of mitigating that risk of abuse or misuse of funds?
Mhm. Well, one, don't appoint an attorney that can't manage their own finances. So if you're going to appoint your nephew who has just gone through a consumer proposal and has $25,000 of credit card debt, that's not a great idea. You want to make sure that they're going to manage their funds well. One of the things that we use is we have what we call a trusted contact. So it's sort of an unofficial role, but somebody that we would keep informed as to what the financial situation is. So we would talk to the client to the extent that they can understand what we're interpreting. But that trusted contact, it could be a friend, it could be a family member. Sometimes it's the financial advisor. But who would be looking over our shoulder? Because there should be somebody that is aware of what the plans are. So we're sort of informally accountable to them. At the end of the day, you're in essence accountable to the beneficiaries, but that could be a long way down the road. And when you talk about the perpetrators, from our experience, typically it's a family member, and typically it's an adult son. So there's and I'm not just, I'm not being sexist or bashing, just when they do the studies, and elder financial abuse is the most common form of elder abuse. The clients that I talk to, they don't like the word abuse. They would never say that they were financially abused by their son, but they might say that they were mistreated or that they, there were some discrepancies in how the monies were handled. But people don't want to use the title abuse because then they're a victim. And then they think, well, maybe there's something I could have done to prevent it. So, yeah, so I'm not keen on the whole idea of joint accounts. I really think that the solo ager should be ultimately the account holder. If they want to have a joint account with a family member to pay bills, then set up a side account. You know what your bills are each month, move $3,000 into that account, and then do it like an auto transfer, and then have that helping person pay the bills from that account. So it makes it a whole lot easier down the road with the states. If you got joint accounts, then that child could say at the end of the day, hey, joint accounts with mom. She said that whatever's left was mine. Well, that's not usually the intention. Usually the intention is for helping. And I have a few colleagues on the call today, and they know that I went through a 2-year lawsuit with a client. The son had been helping himself to somewhere between 300 and 600,000. And we don't know for sure because we can't find records going back far enough. And when mom appointed me as the attorney under the power of attorney, that line you talk about, sports, the best defense is a good offense. He immediately launched a lawsuit or an application against the mom. First off, declaring that she didn't have capacity to make the changes. And it took months and months and months to dispute that. Then the next claim was that there had been undue influence by the daughter and myself, and that we were in cahoots and we were going to coerce mom and that we were going to take advantage of mom. Anyway, it went on for 2 years, and fortunately that client had the assets, but that lawsuit, all the legal fees came to close to $500,000. And so here's the other thing. Because the son was named as the attorney under the power of attorney, so that meant he had access to the finances. He could do everything to pay the bills on behalf of mom, and at one point dad was still alive. So he had full access to the funds to do the right thing. He had himself added as a joint account holder. So now, legally, when he moved those funds from mom's accounts into an account in his name only, it wasn't illegal. It was immoral. It was wrong. He did it without talking to mom. But because he was a joint account holder, that meant he had full rights to all of those monies. So be really careful about joint accounts. And I forgot the rest of your question.
No, I think that's what I was looking for, was guidance and advice on navigating the space where you're vulnerable and trying to minimize the risk of abuse or misuse of funds. And I think what's evolving in my mind is that there's really a role for two people in managing incapacity. And in the health and personal care piece, the solo ager has to find at least somebody that can carry their voice recorded on paper in our Dear Doctor or Dear Representative letter. And then I'll have Brandy explain in just a second how we as professionals can support that named friend. But the burden on the friend is less. All they have to do is bring to the table your voice and recruit professionals to help advocate for you. Mm-hmm. On the financial side, contracting a professional to manage the financial piece, but then having that second trusted advisor, which could be a friend or family member, but they're not responsible for the day-to-day management or making decisions based on values and preferences, but they're accountable to somebody. I think and there's some parallels there that if I were a solo ager, I think we have some solutions to offer. Jill, I don't know if you want to comment on what I just said, and then Brandy, perhaps you could take the talking stick and just explain a little bit more about the new services that we're about to provide. And then I think we could move into some public questions and answers. But Jill, talking stick to you first.
I guess the one thing I would add is when we have this trusted contact, so this person, there might be somebody that the trusted contact for the financial, maybe we might have a different person for the healthcare stuff. We also really embrace the concept of using a digital vault. So sharing information that way, it's secure, it's safe. and we can add that individual as a collaborator. So when I'm saying sort of looking over our shoulder, it isn't that we're necessarily formally having a meeting with that person every month, etc. But they can access, they can see when we upload bank statements or when we upload bills, they're notified. So they know when there's activity going on. And the onus is on them they can then check in. The trusted contact also, like, it's for us to be accountable to somebody. For the trusted contact, it's also important for them to know where to go. So they have concerns about somebody's failing health or failing decision making. They can then know that they can contact the person that's named as the agent and say, hey, I was over to see Janet the other day, and things, like, she just was, her answers were fuzzy. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if she's been ill or not. Maybe we need to look at enacting the document. So for that trusted contact or family friend to know that there's someone that they can go to. So you've got that triangle. You're working as a team, and we're big fans of teams. I share the workload.
Amen to that. Brandy?
All right. Thanks so much. We've been very busy, Daren and I, working behind the scenes for the last few months, and we're excited to officially introduce today, for the first time, our new serious illness support service. It's a new offering designed to help support and empower people who are aging solo or who may not have a traditional family support system in place. It's a great fit for solo agers who might have distant family members that are far away, or have close friends in their lives, or neighbors, or other trusted people that they're closest with, but they also might not feel comfortable asking them to fully step into the complex role of a healthcare advocate and representative without additional support and guidance. So the Serious Illness Support Service helps people proactively prepare for future healthcare decisions by guiding them one-on-one through the advanced serious illness planning process, helping them thoughtfully choose and prepare a representative to advocate on their behalf, and providing compassionate hands-on support and navigation if a healthcare crisis arises. So, as part of the service, representatives and advocates will also have access to guidance and support directly from Dr. Daren Heyland in his role as a physician navigator. And having the support of an experienced critical care physician like Daren can really help ensure that representatives don't have to navigate the complex healthcare conversations and serious illness decisions alone, and it helps them feel more informed, more confident, and better supported when stepping into the advocacy role. And the goal of the service is to really help ensure that an individual's healthcare wishes and values and priorities are clearly understood and documented and supported, while also providing hands-on guidance and support for the people who might need to step into that advocacy role. That really helps them reduce stress, uncertainty, and the feeling of having to navigate these situations alone. So we're incredibly excited about the potential of this service to really help solo agers feel more informed, more supported, more empowered as they plan ahead for the future. So if you're interested in learning more, we'd be happy to connect with you further for a complimentary 15-minute introductory call. No obligation at all on that. So please keep an eye out in your inbox for more information in the coming days. And so we've now made it to our Q&A period, and I'm going to turn the recording off